that was a wonderful introduction. Thank you, Toby. But what has this got to do with the finance team? Why can't the sustainability team just manage all of this? I think it's important to, whenever I come across this question of why should the finance team be involved in nature-related issues, I try and distill down what is the role of a finance team in an organization in one line. And if you have to say it in one line, it's really about providing decision useful information to stakeholders, be that for internal decision making or external decision making. And in the diagram on the right here, we've got a summary of all. I mean, it's not going to cover every single role, but kind of a categorization of the roles of finance team and the finance activities that are going on. And I think understanding and managing material nature-related risks is a core finance team responsibility. And I think to what Toby was saying, that collaboration is really key here, that we need to work across these roles and across finance and sustainability. So if we go to the next slide, I'll do a quick dive into each of these roles. Now, this is in the primer and is taken from table 3 for anyone who's interested, but a quick overview here. If we start at the top with sort of accounting and record keeping. So integrating nature data into that accounting and record keeping role is going to be needed if we're going to be looking at improved budgeting and resource allocation that takes into account the risks and the opportunities Toby was talking about just now. Similarly, financial reporting. We're going to have to be, that there are going to be increasing demands on organisations to report on nature-related issues, and that is going to be finding its way into financial reporting. We need to be telling a consistent story here. So increasing the role of people working in financial reporting is going to see nature-related issues coming in. Similarly, for financial planning and analysis, if you want to have a resilient business with strategic agility, we're going to have to be taking these issues into account. Looking at strategy and risk, similarly, we need to be considering these nature-related issues because these risks and opportunities are on the rise, both from the physical side that Toby was talking about, also from these transition risk and opportunities. And it's important here to look at, we're not just talking about benefits for business in integrating here, but also talking about the benefits for nature. And I briefly saw one of the questions in the Q&A chat saying, can we really, especially in these economic times, talk about doing work to benefit nature when actually we're in quite hard economic times? But this is really about managing risks for your business and how that improves business resilience and business performance alongside those nature benefits as well. And so if we look at then capital allocation and investment appraisal, integrating nature-related cost and benefits in there is obviously key. And again, not just for looking at your value creation of your business, but also for society and for those nature issues. Funding is an interesting one. We're seeing increasing demands from funders for information on sustainability strategies, governance, planning, and that includes nature-related issues here. If you can address those robustly, it both improves your access to funding and you can get preferential rates on the cost of capital. And finally, management and control. So embedding nature-related metrics into these control systems helps to inform that decision-making and accountability. And as I said here, it's a core element of good corporate governance. So that's just a whistle-stop tour there to give you a feel of some of the information that's in the primer. So hopefully some of you on the call can identify with one or multiple of these aspects of finance activities and to see how nature might be needed to take into account there. But the question is that's great. How do I do that? What tools that are available to help with these roles? So if we go to the next slide, one of the key sort of focuses of primer is talking about these 2 tools to help integrate nature into finance. And we're looking at natural capital assessment on the left here in green and natural capital accounting on the right, which frustratingly have the same acronyms. But the purpose of the natural capital assessment is really, it's broader and more holistic. It's a bit of a more flexible approach, I suppose. And you'll hear more about this in practice of this assessment and accounting approach from Olam. But a natural capital assessment looks at forward-looking view of nature-related risk and opportunities. What nature-related issues are there relevant to my business? And and how do I, and what frameworks can I follow, such as the TNFD LEAP approach and the Natural Capital Protocol. So we have these frameworks that are flexible and really look at making this nature-related assessment relevant for your circumstances. And at the bottom there, we talked about it, supporting finance activities by identifying those material nature risks, enhancing disclosure and compliance, supporting forward-looking analysis, etc. Whilst on the right with natural capital accounting, it's less about making it relevant to your unique circumstances. It's more about providing consistent, comparable, and auditable information. So for those working in finance here, that will sound familiar. It's very much aligned with sort of the aims of financial accounting. We've referenced this standard here, the ISO for natural capital accounting, and it's really about structured, auditable data. And again, here it's saying it should support financial reporting. So we're going to look a little bit here about how these two tools work in practice and connect with finance. So if we go to the next slide, we can see here, I've got the natural capital assessment at the top. So this broad forward-looking assessment that is flexible. These connect very much to the work of financial planning and analysis, as well as other roles, but this is sort of simplified sort of imagery here to help get you the feel of a natural capital assessment. Provides the kind of information that can be used in budgeting and forecasting, scenario analysis. And I found it useful to think about the example that Toby was talking about, this Verda-IMO example, that they are going to have to be looking at, budgeting and forecasting and how water scarcity, for example, is going to be affecting those budgets, those forecasts. Should we be undertaking a stress test to see how this different water availability can affect our business? How does this impact our risk register, strategic decision support, etc.? And a natural capital assessment can really provide the information to feed into those pieces of work. If we then look at the bottom at natural capital accounting, so this more consistent, comparable report, that there's information within there that may need to be recognised in the financial statements or in the notes to those statements. So that really, natural capital accounting, you see that strong connection with financial reporting, because you may come across, you may be disclosing information in your natural capital account that has a connection to the recognition of assets. So Verda-IMO's case, they may be saying, well, actually, we're constructing this asset. What is the value of this asset? Actually, we're going to have increased construction costs. Is the value at the end of the day going to be lower? Do we need to recognise an impairment? Or is it actually just not meeting the test for recognition, but just something we need to disclose in the notes? And so I find this quite helpful to step back and see that connection. A natural capital assessment can support more of that financial planning and analysis, management account style work, whilst natural capital accounting aligns and sort of feeds into financial reporting. If we just go to the next slide, I'll then make it a little bit more complex in that there is cross-pollination between these two approaches. So a natural capital assessment may also inform some disclosures in the notes to the financial statements, and natural capital accounting can also inform financial planning and analysis. There's a bit of crossover because obviously these tools have been developed fairly rapidly when you compare it to the history of financial reporting. But I think there's more information in the primer, and just taking away that kind of alignment of the assessment with FP&A and the accounting with financial reporting is a really helpful place to start. If we come to the next slide, I'll just tie this up with that question I posed 10 minutes ago when I started talking, what has this got to do with the finance team? Why can't the sustainability team just run with this information on nature? So recapping on the Verda-IMO story, where you had this water scarcity disrupting site operations, the board and investors became concerned on other exposures to the company. So in this scenario, the sustainability team then led a portfolio-wide nature review because this issue in Seville had raised the profile of these issues and the risks that the company was facing. So this required a real collaborative approach, as Toby was saying. They found there was high-level nature dependency and impact across sites, and they did an assessment to look at that. And I think what came out of this, the key findings, they looked at the physical risks they were seeing. So in some sites, it might be a water scarcity risk, like Seville, but in other sites across Europe, it might have been flooding or wildfires or urban heat island effects we've got here, which would have a knock-on effect on clients. There are also transition risks, such as the biodiversity net gain rules in the UK or no net land take laws across Europe. But there are also opportunities there, such as rainwater harvesting, green roofs. So doing these assessments helps to highlight this, how nature is intrinsically related to business risk and opportunity. And then looking at what is next with the IMO, the CFO was appointed in this example to oversee the nature strategy. And I think, that's not such a radical idea as it may sound. If you think about the scenario here and the work that's been done, finance will need to lead on integrating those nature risks into your capital investment planning. If we're seeing these effects of the risks of flooding and wildfires, that needs to be integrated into the forecast, your budget, your capital investment planning, the risk management, insurance, for example. And so when we talk about this collaborative approach, it's absolutely essential, and it may be finance leading the integration of nature. Even if it's another team leading it, finance absolutely has to be involved because that's at the heart of the business. And on that note, I will pass back to Toby.